Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Courseware webinar and launch for Principles of Supply Chain Management and Operations. My name is Paul Cotter. I'm a product marketing manager here at Stukent, and I get to be your host today. I'm so excited for what we have planned today on our agenda. We are going to get to hear from Danaka Porter. Danaka is the author of our new supply chain courseware. And she is going to tell us all about it, do a little deep dive, and then when she finishes, we get to have a Q&A with her. So save up all your questions or put them in the chat function, and at the end, we'll be sure and get those answered. I'd like to just go over a couple of housekeeping items as we begin today. And if you see me looking down, I apologize. I'm just looking at my notes so that I don't miss anything. What I want to talk to you about right now is our format. Probably some of you have been to a Stukent event before, but some of you, this may be your first time. We like and encourage participation in our webinars. So we want you to be sure and use the chat function on the side of the screen. At any time, enter in to the chat and you can ask any questions. Let us know. Enter in right now. Let us know where you're at right now, your name, and let us know what school you teach at. We'd love to hear from you. Looks like we have Laura Munoz. She's from Dallas. Laura is actually the co-author of Introduction to Business. One of these posters up behind me right there. Welcome, Laura. It looks like we have Vicki from Northwest Arkansas. And I'm guessing that Vicki is the co-author of our Logistics and Transportation courseware, which is right here. And that is launching on Friday. So be sure and join us on Friday for that. Ed from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Rich Miller, Laura's co-author from Dallas. Looks like we have Isa from the University of Toledo, Ohio. Michael from Folsom, California. You guys keep it coming in. We are here in Southeast Idaho. That's where Stukent headquarters is. And it's a cold, brisk, stormy morning this morning. We all drove into work today with a really heavy, wet snow. So hopefully where you're at, it might be a little warmer than where we are. Hillary's joining us from Vancouver, Canada. We know it's not warmer there, but we feel your pain. Amy is from the University of Wisconsin at Green Bay. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy to have you with us. Keep the chats going, okay? I want to chat with you a little bit about this webinar that we're having. If at any time you have to leave early, don't worry. We are recording this and we will send this recording out to each of you because you registered for the event. So don't worry about that. If you have a question for Danaka, go ahead and chat it in anytime. And don't worry if it's not answered in the moment. We're keeping a log of those. And at the very end, I'll come back on and I'll read all of your questions to Danaka. So use this as an opportunity to ask the author specific questions. I want to start out with a fun little poll question. And this question is actually something that's addressed in Danaka's new courseware. And the question is, how many different types of Cheerios are there? So we are going to launch that poll right now. And that should pull up on your screen so that you can see that. How many different types of Cheerios are there? Go ahead and put your guesses in. Okay, it looks like we've got a 4, we've got a 5. Danaka told me that this is actually something that she addresses in her courseware when she talks about SKUs. It used to be that the number of SKUs that grocery stores have has skyrocketed over the years. And the reason is because the brands have just really expanded what they're doing. So it looks like, let's see, Bethany guessed 20, And that is the closest guess right now. The answers, you guys, is 19. There are 19 different SKUs for Cheerios. Can you believe that? I was shocked when I heard that answer. I didn't know there were so many different flavors and sizes of Cheerios. Anyways, so supply chain can be fun and supply chain can be interesting, and Danaka's going to show us all about that today. We are going to have some giveaways today during our event. One of the things that we are going to offer you for joining us today is free access to Danaka's new courseware, Principles of Supply Chain Management and Operations. We're going to put a link up, and if you click on that link, you can go through and you can just fill out if you're a university professor, what your position is, and enter your email address, and we will get you free access to this courseware. And also, anyone today who requests free access, we're going to put you in a drawing for a $100 Amazon gift card. So be sure and fill out that form, click on that, and get your free instructor access and enter to win for the Amazon gift card. We will announce that winner and email that out tomorrow after everyone's had a chance to get through that today. I also want to chat with you a little bit about some of the upcoming events that we have here at Stukent. And this I'm going to have to look at my notes for because we have so many events coming up. So tomorrow we actually have a webinar for name, image, and likeness. So NIL, that's going on tomorrow. And then Friday, like I already said, we have our courseware launch for logistics and transportation. So please join us for that. If you're watching this, you're probably very likely interested in supply chain logistics and operations also. So you can click on the event link that we posted, and you can register for any of these events. Some of the others we have coming up, next Tuesday, we have advanced selling. Next Thursday, we have public speaking. And then at the beginning of December, we have strategic planning and management. So we have a lot of events coming up. We're really excited. If you're familiar with Stukent, you know that we have a lot of marketing, business and communication courseware and simulations for higher education and even high school. So please check out our events and see what courses which courseware can be used for your courses that you're teaching. I also want to tell you about a very special event that Stukent will be hosting in June, and it's called ProfCon. ProfCon is the #1 marketing conference for educators, and we've put a link up here for that also. At ProfCon, you're going to learn about the latest trends, strategies, and best practices, and it's a great gathering for marketing professors. So we want to encourage you to click on the link and register for that. If you've never attended, it's fantastic. What's exciting about this year is this is our first year since 2019 that we're holding the event in person. So we're very excited to do that. We're actually going to be holding the event here in Idaho Falls, Idaho. And if you come, you will be able to participate in some fantastic networking opportunities and events that we have. And one of those events is a trip to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, just at the base, the foot of the Teton Mountain Range, the Grand Tetons. It's a beautiful area, beautiful city, beautiful country. We'd love for you to come and join us during this conference. Just so that you know, we do have early bird pricing in effect for ProfCon. If you purchase your ticket before Black Friday, the ticket is $297, okay? So be sure and get your ticket before Black Friday to save some money. Also, if you are a Stukent customer, you do get $100 off that. So if you're new to Stukent and you're joining us today, you can fill out an order form and be a customer for supply chain and get a discount right off the bat. We also, if you have been a Stukent customer for 5 or more years, your ProfCon registration is 50% off. That's a fantastic deal. And if you have been a student customer for 7 or more years, then we don't even charge you to come to ProfCon. It's absolutely free. So check out the links, guys. Come and join us for ProfCon. We're going to have such an amazing time. We're so excited to finally have this event in person again and to show you guys around student headquarters in Idaho Falls, Idaho. All right. Well, what I want to do is we have just a very short video to just explain a little bit about ProfCon. So I'm going to put that video up and then we'll do. All right, so that's just a little hype video that our video department has made. I see, Bethany, you asked, is ProfCon all about simulations or does it go beyond that? ProfCon is so much more than simulations. We do offer boot camps and different events at ProfCon where you can have some one-on-one time and learn about the simulations and see how they function. But ProfCon is a wide variety of marketing topics for educators. It's all about latest trends, best practices, and strategies that you can use as a marketing professor in the classroom. So be sure and check that out. We are also still looking for some speakers for ProfCon. So if you're interested, that website does have a link, and let us know. Drop us a line and let us know if you'd be interested in speaking, and we'd love to chat about that. All right, now what I want to do is I want to get to what we're here for, our supply chain courseware. I want to start out before I bring Danica on, and I want to show you a little video that our video team has made that highlights a bit of the courseware and some of the simulation. So we're going to bring that up right now and give that a watch.
Bridge the gap between theory and application with the Supply Chain Simulation and Courseware Bundle from Stukent. The all-new Principles of Supply Chain Management and Operations courseware gives you robust tools to teach students to apply appropriate forecasting methods, manage inventory levels to meet demands, set up sourcing and procurement processes, and more. This courseware was developed by Danaka Porter, who holds a Master's of Engineering degree from MIT and is a sessional instructor at the University of Lethbridge. Danica brings a wealth of public and private supply chain experience to the text and takes your students a step beyond supply chain theory, showing them how to apply classroom concepts to real-world situations. To complement the courseware, Danica created a suite of turnkey resources for educators, including detailed lesson plans, lecture slide decks, engaging assignments, and more. When you pair this courseware with Stukent's immersive Mimic supply chain simulation, you can give your students hands-on experience working with realistic supply chain scenarios. Over 9 rounds, students will forecast demand and place purchase orders to maintain inventory levels, suggest warehouse locations to optimize network design, and perform other authentic supply chain tasks and duties. To see how Stukent's Supply Chain Bundle can boost your curriculum, schedule a walkthrough with one of our course consultants today, and be sure to stay current with Stukent.
All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that video. Just a little summary of the courseware and a little sneak peek at this peak of the simulation that's coming very soon. Now, without further delay, I want to invite Danica Porter onto the stage. And we are going to turn the time over to Danica, and she's going to walk us through her courseware and her presentation today. So that you all know, when we finish with Danica's presentation, I'll get back on and we will do a question and answer. So once again, be sure and just enter in any questions that you have in the chat and we will address them at the end. Danica, welcome.
Hi,
Great to see you today. Tell us where you're from.
I'm currently in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. A little bit about -22 Celsius here, but beautiful skies and It's sunny, so I have no
Well, you're
complaints.
looking nice and warm in your office, so looks like you're cozy. All
Yes,
right. Well, Danica,
absolutely.
thank you for joining us today, and we are going to turn the time over to you. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So, the principles of supply chain management and operations. I, I really enjoyed the process of writing this, but before we get into what I've written about or why I've written, it's probably useful for me to introduce myself a little bit more for those of you that don't know me. So the next slide will show my a little bit about my bio. So, as Paul has kindly introduced me, I'm Danaka Porter, and I really want to thank you all for tuning in today to, learn about my textbook, The Principles of Supply Chain Management and Operations. A little bit about my background. I obtained my Master of Engineering from MIT in Systems and Supply Chain. I'm currently a partner at IOTA Consulting, where I consult in supply chain, project management, and data analytics. I typically specialize in heavy manufacturing and technology. And then, of course, my work has included some, management of suppliers through automated compliance, and a whole bunch of other really fun things. I'm also a sessional lecturer at the Dillon School of Business, where I teach supply chain management, project management, and occasionally another random course such as business research methodology. I write algorithms for my clients. I have pulled that over into a little bit of like the med tech side, where I'm the co-founder and current COO of Vita Nova Technologies. It's a fertility company in the US. I was lucky enough to write the algorithms to better match surrogates and egg donors with intended parents. And then further to that, I'm also currently completing my PhD in cardiology at the Cumming School of Medicine. So I'm focusing on using supply chain and process improvement and optimization to improve cardiac software. So that is a little bit about me. And now our lovely next slide is, why did I write? Like, who wants to write a textbook? Don't I already have enough on my plate? Well, yes. I've always wanted to write. I have always been interested in how people learn and in how I learn. I'm definitely not your typical learner. In fact, I would be called atypical. I have, a couple of learning disabilities that just made school really difficult for me. And going through it, I don't really like the current options as a student, and I didn't really enjoy them now as a prof. I've been teaching since fall of 2018, and there's not a lot of awesome stuff out there. I sort of just ended up picking and pulling from textbooks and then creating my own sort of courseware while teaching. I wanted something that was applicable, not something that had been published, 5 to 10 years prior. So it was super frustrating. I wanted something that could stay current, that was current, and I was lucky enough to be given this opportunity. Millie Dopp, who is the author relations here at Stucan, approached me in April 2021. Have you ever thought about writing your own textbook? I'm like, well, I've had thoughts about lots of things, but actually putting it into practice, not necessarily. So we chatted about my whys, the drivers, and I sort of ended up blurting out that I was a firm believer that someone cannot complain about something if they have the means to fix it. And so we're all here today because this is me trying to fix it. I didn't enjoy the textbooks that were out there or available. So here we are. The next slide is going to go over the table of contents. So this is what I have in the textbook. And I've sort of started it and I tried to model it after how things would naturally flow through a supply chain, right? You sort of figure out what the intro is, what do you want to do, maybe some of the challenges and then the approaches you have to take to deal with these challenges. Then you want to plan and forecast. And then once that's done, you can source, you can procure, you can get things, and you have to deal with your inventory. You need to figure out how you're managing it. What models are you going to use? Then you've made all these things. Let's put it into into the real world. So we're going to transport it out. We're going to have warehouses. We're going to, do some network modeling. Then we need to measure how successful we are, right? Then we have to look at a global perspective. To become really successful, then you're going to go global. And then you want to coordinate all of this. And then, of course, now that you have those really awesome base understanding, we're going to apply it. So chapter 12 is actually a chapter dedicated to just sort of case studies and examples. As a professor, you can choose to, not have your students go through that, and you can use those as, tests or examples or take homes, although there's plenty of that, or you can use it in class and you can have class discussions. I have 3 sort of fairly what I call simple case studies. They only touch on like 1 or 2 aspects of supply chain. And then I have 3 complex ones, which talk about, 4 or 5 different parts. They are real world examples. They are real companies that have gone through issues, and it's now, how are you going to apply this? Like, what are you going to do? And so it encourages and sort of rounds out the learning that all the students have done through chapters 1 to 11. So on to the next slide here. This courseware is unique. One of my favorite movies is by DreamWorks, and it's called Home. It stars Rihanna, Jim Parsons, Steve Martin, and J-Lo. And one of my favorite lines is when Steve Martin's character, Captain Smack, explains and yells out, "Oh, his password is unique!" Because all the aliens have been trying really, really hard to fit in. Well, this courseware fits out. It doesn't fit in. It's very different. It's digital, which means every year I can update it. Every year the students can get new cool examples. They get new links to news articles. They get new links to company profiles. Whatever has happened in the last year in supply chain, instant. We've updated it. No longer are you going to like open a textbook and sort of blow the dust off and look at an example that has been 10 years prior and, not applicable. It also includes this really awesome expert session library. I reached out to some really awesome alum from my schools, and I got them to submit video recordings. So I have someone who works for GE Power in Germany. I have someone that works for the port in the country of Jordan. I have someone that is working for the Dutch embassy in Colombia. And I have these people talking about all the various supply chain things that they deal with on a day-to-day basis and issues that happen, because I want to show students that supply chains are 1, global, and 2, they have the same problems. Even if you're in like one country or the other, like you still can have the same similar, supply chain issues, and then the same approaches quite often apply, but it's how you apply it. So I have these lovely people that have come together and, created these wonderful expert sessions that students can, again, take from, learn, and, apply. For the profs, I know what it's like. I know what it's like to be dumped a course that you're not used to teaching. I also know what it's like to, teach a course that this is your bread and butter. This is like your raison d'etre. So I have lots and lots and lots of resources for you. 34 assignments and activities. I have 6 case studies, 2 tests, a ton of quizzes, and a whole lot of extra stuff that is sort of like instructor only. I really, really, really wanted to make sure that everybody had a lot of info, whether you were new to teaching supply chain or you are an expert. You can pick and choose. You can make this sort of courseware fit your course. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple slides coming up. The next slide is really more about what the benefit is to the student. So obviously, we've all been students. We all went through grade school. A lot of us went through university and up, and now we're teaching. But to be a student, there wasn't anything more frustrating for me when I would open up a textbook and I'd see a reference to an event. It was from a decade ago. And it's like, well, lots of stuff has changed. Like just in the past 10 years, right? Like the amount of things and technology that have changed has skyrocketed, right? Like you have the internet on your phone now, and 10, 15 years ago, that wasn't really a thing. It was, very difficult to get through. We have touchscreen everything. We have biometrics. And so I would like some current examples. And I think the students just resonate better with literature that is current. It is addressing current situations or current events. And this courseware does just that. Even year to year, students might use this same supply chain, management and principles textbook, and it's different because they took it in the fall of this semester, their friend takes it next fall, and I've done some updates. So they have different examples, they have different activities. So it's a different textbook, it's a different field because it's staying current. So this obviously increases the knowledge base because people talk. I remember going through school and I was in a sorority and we would have sort of test banks and notes, and you could learn from your peers, and they'd be like, oh, this prof likes to test on this, or this is this, or here's the textbook. And it was like, yeah, it was cool that you could get a textbook like much cheaper, but again, like the examples are now more old. But this way I'll have new examples and new ways of thinking, and when people come together and they share knowledge, it will improve both people's knowledge because they can talk about things that the other one perhaps didn't have that example, but they had this one, and it just increases the knowledge base for everybody. Then they can also go back to those excerpt sessions. Like I said, this global supply chain, I'm trying to hammer that into the textbook, that supply chain is like a global thing. It, kind of impacts you, and it goes through all kinds of, sourcing and procurement issues all around the world. So I see there's a little poll up, so feel free to take time to answer that. And then I'm going to talk about the one other really cool part that I liked about my textbook is that most chapters come with a jobs and careers section, specifically focused on what was just talked about in that chapter. Because supply chain has gotten so big, there are so many different jobs, and I don't think people really realize that you don't have to go super broad. You can, but you can also, if you really like forecasting, there are a ton of different forecasting jobs, and they're called different things. And so I sort of call out what they're called, where you can look for them, and then I put it, in some places like very generic salary expectations. And I think they're a lot higher than most students would expect. Like just four-year, undergrad coming out, and it's like some of these salaries, and they're, like a very, I looked at the roles, and they're quite, entry level, and they're starting at like $60,000, $75,000 a year. Like that's a very good starting salary for just 4 years and not a ton of job experience. But I wanted to show people like what they could do. I think so many times you go through textbooks, and part of my undergrad was spent in math. Not one professor talked to us about where math was applicable in the real world, where I could get a job using my degree, in math. And so obviously after third year, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I switched majors and ended up in economics. But same thing, like you go through class and you're like, I don't know what I can do for work besides maybe being a prof, which means more school. So again, I wanted a textbook that gave the students resources of like, you don't feel like doing a master's? You don't have to. Here's a whole gamut of jobs. And if you really like this chapter, here's a bunch of jobs related to this chapter. I wanted students to feel prepared for, the real world, quote unquote. So let's go back to you as the prof and the instructor. What are those benefits and features? Well, I explain a concept and then I provide an example and I walk the student through it. I also explain, while going through this example, what is being done and why it's being done. I have a lot of math in this textbook, but it's not necessarily difficult math, and it's more to show the students sort of the breakdown and then how each piece, of this particular aspect of supply chain fits together, so that they can go through and say, oh, okay, I understand that if I alter this part, this is going to change. And so I use the math to sort of show them that, whereas they don't have to do a ton of math. They can see it built through. And then I also have examples where there isn't any math, because I understand that not everybody enjoys math. So I've just tried to have all the options and all the variety of it. I also really discuss the fact that you need to apply it. And if you don't understand the answer that you got, you don't really know what's going on. And so you really need, it's more important to understand what, say, the metric means, or what you just calculated, what the answer means, than actually calculating it. So I discuss heavily this is answer means this, and then this is how to apply like the human aspect. I talk about supply chain as both an art and a science. The science is the heavy duty math. The art is knowing that this number needs to be applied in a certain way. And say that's, looking at a warehouse location, and it puts it sort of in the middle and says, this is the most, it optimizes like your cost and your fuel usage and all this stuff. But then you look and you're like, man, if I moved it just 2 miles, I'd be closer to a city, or closer to this, or I wouldn't have to do that. This is the better decision. And so it's using that science and then the art of like the human brain of taking in all of the things into account and saying, okay, this actually makes more sense to move it here. Then, we have the simulation. And this is a huge benefit, because unlike most simulations with sort of like throw the student in at the C-suite level of like, oh, here, you're a CEO of this company. Like, let's be real. These are students in undergrad. They're not going to be the CEO right away, or very few of them are, unless you take, Jen's entrepreneur class. Maybe you'll get there then. But we need to put them in a role that they will actually be likely to do or land in once they've graduated. So that's exactly what we do. Students come in the simulation, they start as sort of a summer intern, a summer student, and a new grad, and they go through this process of like, here's what you're going to do, some like basic forecasting, some basic things. And then through the sim, we're building and building and building on these skills. And so when they're done this simulation, they've had like essentially 2 years of work experience through the simulation, where we've built on things and we've added it and we've made it more difficult, and we've asked them to do multiple things at once. And it touches on all the aspects again of supply chain. And so they get experience in sourcing, in procurement, in inventory management, in warehouse location, and dealing with transportation, and having, global issues, dealing with cross-border things, because this is, what's happening in the world. We actually even provide coaching notes in this simulation. And so when the round ends, the students are provided with a scorecard and feedback, so they can see where they can, adjust, where they can fix things. And, it's a nice little learning thing. And then, of course, I've designed this courseware to be incredibly adaptable for each instructor and prof. There are a lot of options, and there are the ability to hide or show examples that I've created in the textbook. I've made sort of most of the like really big examples. The prof instructor can hide it and say, okay, I don't really want to show my students yet, or I'm going to use this in class and we'll have a discussion about it. I have made these, 34 activities and assignments flexible. They are able to, use them in sort of any manner that they want. So I also update this course. Like, that's one of the most exciting factors, is that I can constantly update and tweak the course, or change the examples, based on some feedback. So even year to year, as the instructor, you might see differences in examples, and my courseware is going to reflect these current global issues. So you're going to have new information for you every year on just sort of things that have happened all around the world. And I'm really, really excited for that. There is another poll up, as you can see, so please take the time to answer that. So let's really do a deep dive into these, instructor resources. As I mentioned earlier, there's instructor only options, so you can hide things and keep it from your students so that you can use it as an example. You can go through it in class. And the reason for this is that not every instructor has taught supply chain before. Like, I have to go teach a course next semester that's business research methodology. It'll be my first time teaching it. So it's helpful when you're like a little nervous. It's not your, typical thing that you teach. I've tried to make it so that you have everything you could ever need. That safety net is there. So I got you. But if you've taught it a million times, this allows you to pick and choose. Maybe you want to use these as in-class activities, or you want to, keep this to yourself or use it on a test. Again, I've just provided all of that flexibility to use the courseware in a way that best suits how you teach, who your students are and like how you're teaching, if you're online, if it's asynchronous, if it's synchronous, if you have the mixed, like the blended where you have people physically in class, but also online, like everything in this course is adaptable. All the assignments, all the tests, all the quizzes, they are so easy to be done in all these different settings, you know? I also have lecture slides for each chapter, and they have significant speaking notes in each slide. That is something that I've done. I've been given, you know, slide decks before from whatever publishing company. And it's like, they come and they're like, instructor, you know, slide deck. You're like, oh, okay, cool, maybe it'll be, and it's like exactly the same as the student one. There's no difference. There's no additional links. There's no additional maybe speaking notes or like discuss or talk about, you know, like a certain aspect of this in the chapter. There's none of that. Whereas with my textbook, I did that for you. So if you don't like that, clear them out. It doesn't matter. If you do like it, it's there for you. Like I said, I have all of these options for you. I want to make sure that you're well prepared to go into that classroom and, you know, speak knowledge. So one last slide on instructor resources. And as you can see, there's, you know, an activity and assignment example, and I've set it up that way. So it can be done in class in person. It can be done, you know, as a take home by yourself, take home it with other students. It can be used as like, you know, so you have an in-class quiz on top of the quizzes that I've already created. It can be used as an in-class assignment, like by yourself. Like I have made it so that everything is able to be done in a group setting, alone, or online, or at home, or in class. Like everything is able to be done in whatever manner suits you, the prof or instructor, best. I also have created syllabi and course calendars for, you know, once a week courses, twice a week courses, and 3 times a week courses. I've also linked this up to the simulation, and it'll tell you, hey, this is when you need to be doing this round of the simulation. This is when you need to be doing this round of the simulation. And then, you know, there's lesson plans. There's all these activities, like I said, in assignments, 34 activities and assignments, like you're good to go. There's a chapter quiz for the first 11 chapters. The last chapter, like I said, is case study. So you can, you know, hide one of those if you want and just show 2 and then have a test on that. There's also 2 exams. And then once again, there's that lovely expert session library. There's links to articles and publications, and you just have all this resources there for you to help with teaching. And so that's how I designed this course, where I really wanted it to be awesome for students, and I wanted it to be awesome for the instructors. And that kind of, you know, wraps us up a bit. We have an activity, so I did pull one of them out of the textbook for us to do today. And so we can like quickly have a look at it. And then I think Paul said there might be a giveaway. So he will have to come back on stage for that once we've done this activity. But I thought it would be really fun to do and just sort of like talk through it. And so you can see how I've set some things up. So what I wanted to do with this activity was to discuss that supply chain differences when the focus is on meeting demand instead of minimizing your cost or maximizing your revenue. Most supply chains are set up to do exactly that, maximize your revenue or minimize costs, right? It's optimized to do that. But there are situations in the world where that isn't applicable. Like let's look at defense, and let's look at the complete other end of the spectrum, humanitarian aid. You're not trying to minimize cost or maximize revenue. You are trying to get as much food, blanket, and medication as you possibly can to cover this unknown amount of demand. You've had a natural disaster, you've had war, you've had an outbreak of something, you need to get help there. So when you are doing this, you're looking to maximize your demand. You no longer want to use the EOQ or economic order quantity because that's, you know, looking at the cost and stuff. You are just trying to figure out and maximize the demand. And that's important to note that in supply chain, that's still part of a supply chain, is knowing the situation and saying, hey, these inventory models or these demand models don't apply. in every situation, right? You're not always trying to minimize your cost or maximize your revenue, because we're not, the UN isn't being like, well, I think we'll cover like 75% of what we perceive to be demanded for like blankets and stoves. Like, they're just going to send as much as they can. Same with defense. They're not going to say, well, I don't think we're only going to send you with like this many, this much ammunition or this many bandages, because like we're not really sure what you're using, right? There are times when certain models just don't apply. And that's what I wanted students to understand, is that you can learn all the stuff you want, but like learning how to apply it, and when it perhaps doesn't apply, or when other options apply, or when you look at demand in a different way, that is sort of a different application. And so having these discussions in the classroom of like, well, when would this occur? Because I think we're so focused on supply chain as it only happens in a plant. And it's like, well, actually not. Supply chain is that flow of information, of goods and money through a system to, an end user. And so sometimes you want to minimize your costs or maximize your revenue, and other times you want to maximize covering your demand. So these are some of the activities that look into that. And then of course I do provide like written, things and examples and discussion for the instructors and the profs just to have on their hand, but to just get the class into some kind of discussion, into looking outside of the typical aspect they say of, like they would maybe normally see in supply chain. And then the other part of this activity is compare humanitarian supply chains to for-profit supply chains. Now, how are you going to measure success, right? In a typical, for-profit supply chain, you measure your success through the fact that you've increased revenue or that you've decreased your operating costs. But when it comes to humanitarian aid, how are you measuring success? Well, you're measuring the amount of demand that you're covering, right? The amount of people that you can get blankets to. That's your measure of success. And how quickly you can get them, the blankets, the food, and the medication that they need. And so it's just having these conversations in class, or it's getting your students to sit down and figure this out. These are, humanitarian aid, and this stuff is, discussed in the textbook, but it's also encouraging these students to now think and apply. They've absorbed the learning, and it's like, okay, like look out and use your brain and figure out how this applies to you, how it doesn't apply, when it wouldn't. What are other scenarios where it's best to cover your demand versus max your cost, maximizing your revenue or minimizing your cost? And there's other ways of measuring success. We have so many things of like, we are trying to reduce costs. Like that's constantly sort of all you hear. Twitter's had this massive layoff because the new owner, Elon Musk, is trying to minimize his costs, right? But there's not always, options to do that. You have to look at other ways to measure your success. Like, how were you successful? Well, I wanted to get this many blankets out to this many people in this time, and I got more than, and in less than the amount of time. Like looking at it from a different angle, that not everything is always measured in dollars, but sometimes it's measured in the scenario and the situation and what you can do. So that really wraps up what my textbook is about. And then I will turn it back over to Paul Cotter. But thank you all for coming today and learning about my textbook. And so, yeah, thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Danaka. Stay on with us. You did an awesome job. That was fantastic. We loved learning about supply chain and everything your courseware has to offer. Now, before we're going to get ready to do the Q&A, so take some time to enter questions in the chat if you have any. I also want to give you one last chance to request the free instructor access to her courseware. Click on the link, request that access. It's a really quick, simple process. It'll take you about 30 seconds. And then before we finish and leave today, we'll announce the winner of the $100 gift card. But what I want to do is, Danaka, let's talk about the poll question. We had a poll question of how long was Ever Given stuck in the Suez Canal? And let me just look and see what our answers were. So 59% said 10 days and 41% said 6 days. What's the answer?
The answer is
Okay.
6, just shy of a
All right.
week. And I wanted to like give a little bit more information on that. So I think a lot of people don't know is that both the Panama Canal and the Suez Canal have their own pilots. So these people will board the ship and they will take over for the captain and they will steer the ship through the canal. So this was so brutal for this poor captain because he's not allowed to drive through the Suez Canal, but he's getting all the flack for having ground his ship when it wasn't actually him. It was a Suez Canal pilot. So I just felt really bad for that captain because people are just like, oh my gosh, like, how does this person not know how to drive and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, because he wasn't, because they literally have specific drivers that all they do every day, all day is drive through that, Suez Canal. And this was a relatively newer pilot. And so you ended up with this lovely disaster that just, and the effect rippled straight through into June, actually. So it happened in March, but we were still feeling the effects of it in June.
Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know they had special pilots for that. That's good to know.
Yeah.
I want to do one more question that you had. You had a good trivia question, and maybe we can talk about this a little before we do the Q&A. So you asked people to name 3 brands which burned their product to protect their exclusivity. So let me just read you. Well, actually, I'll let people name brands. You can go ahead and enter them in the chat, and let's see what brands. 3 brands that burned their product to protect their exclusivity. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Danica? Why you put that trivia question in?
I put it in because I think people are, once again, with supply chain, are so focused on the like, ooh, I have to meet all of demand and then some, and they focus on the fact that the cost of stocking out, i.e. not having that product, is likely more expensive than having more of the product. Well, when you get into luxury brands or well-known high-end brands, they don't want to put things on sale. They don't want excess inventory. It is actually more beneficial for them to have less product because then it's exclusive, then it's a limited edition. And so if they don't sell all of a certain year's, purses, shoes, clothing, whatever, they were burning it because they would not put it on sale, but they didn't want to keep it in inventory, physical space. It takes up a lot, and they just didn't want it proliferating the market. And so it's very interesting because I think we're so focused on, like, you want to meet all your demand or then some, or you want to like get to the right amount, and then you'll have a salvage value. You can sell it on sale and you'll still recoup some of the costs. And so you have to then think about the cost of these luxury goods. If companies can afford to burn it, the markup that you are paying is that it is cheaper for them to burn it than it is to sell it. Like that shows you the markup, that shows you the exclusivity and the hold that this brand has, right? There's like a several year wait list for the famous like Birkin bag by Hermes. This is one of the reasons, because they come out with enough and they just don't have enough people, or they don't like enough people that want it yet. They just want to like, oh, well, the wait list we keep it around 3 years. So we keep it around 3 years, even if they have ones available. So they get rid of it. And it's just to protect that exclusivity and scene. Whereas then you have like the H&M, like Forever 21 and stuff like that. They would just like mass produce, and then they put everything on sale, and you can pick up a t-shirt for like $4 at the end of the year. These brands are like, absolutely not, we're not doing that. We're saying, well, we only have 900 of these in the world, so we're this spring summer edition of it, and they're sticking to it.
Nice.
So it's a very different way of doing supply
chain. Let me
chain.
read you some of the brands that came in, and then you can tell us the brands. So Jennifer said Louis Vuitton, Bob said Nike, Jennifer said Coach, Doug said Lululemon, and Melinda said Burberry, Louis Vuitton. What are some of the answers?
Those are actually all correct. I don't know if Lululemon does or not. But I know that all of these companies have been caught doing it, and they have been sort of issued massive fines, and that they need to figure out a way to repurpose this rather than just discarding it and burning it. That's not an appropriate thing to do. And so they've gotten some pretty massive penalties, and they supposedly have stopped doing this and are trying to repurpose. But there's better ways to do it. I mean, when you have food that's gone bad, like, yeah, that is something that you do have to actually, potentially destroy, or hopefully you can turn it into something else. But when you have perfectly good clothing, or, leather goods or shoes, like, there's lots of people without. So having a company just like burn it to keep exclusivity doesn't look very good. But the reason for that is that it's cheaper for them to do that. They want that exclusivity so they can continue to increase those prices year after year.
Fascinating. Looks like Santiago said, in the food supply chain, we destroy, reprocess the extra production when the minimum batch exceeds the demand. So not just,
yeah. And that's a good way of doing it.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's address some of the questions. First question I have here is, can I use this courseware next semester?
Oh, in January. I would say yes. I think the courseware, the sim it'll still be in its beta testing, but the courseware, yes, it will. If you would like to use it in January, I'm pretty certain it's ready to go. I've looked at it in Edify, and we can, go from there. But I can check with Ryan, my editor, and see. But he emailed me yesterday and was like, we're basically there. So I don't see why you couldn't use it for this January.
Yes, the courseware is available for use in January. And like you said, if there's someone wanting to maybe help us beta test, pilot the simulation in the first semester of next year, reach out and we'd be happy to chat with you about that. Okay, there's a question here. Cameron asked, do you have a strong focus on operations?
So I tried to weave the two together because I don't think that they stand alone, and I don't think they should. The reason why so many companies have supply chain issues is because they sort of try and silo everything. Like, oh, operations does this, but this does this. And I've tried to, in the textbook, weave and say, like, these decisions or this thing you're doing, this is how it can impact and operate. This is how it can impact here. And so I've tried to ensure that people are aware of everything and how one decision in one aspect will impact, everything down the line. So I wouldn't say that it has like the most strong focus on operations, but it's equally strong across, the management, modeling, operations, like the applicability of, this is the decision that you made based on these, numbers that you crunched, and this is how it actually impacts the business operations, decide the things that have to happen. So that's how I've tried to do it, because I consult in supply chain, and this is the biggest issue that I see, is that people just sort of say that no, operations is separate, and it's like, no, it's not. You're all tied together. And so I've really tried to make sure that the textbook links everything up so that you can see what doing one thing here impacts through all these different, features of the supply chain.
Great. You're getting some really good comments here. Jennifer said, this looks so well thought out. Thank you, Danica. Santiago had a question. Does this course have mathematical exercises? Does the course have cost exercises?
They have examples in the course with math. So there is quite a lot of math, but I have not specifically created exercises that are like super math heavy. They will pull from an example. So I give an example, walk through all the math, and then there's an activity that can also be used as an assignment or whatever that does have math in it. So they do have to do some calculation, but the focus is still like, if we've changed this number, what does it mean for the outcome? Like, I don't just want people to go through and do the math. They need to know all the different pieces and what those means. And if one thing changes, how is it going to change the outcome? So yes, there are mathematical exercises, but the answer and the stuff that I've asked for in those assignments is like, if this has changed, or if you increase, this, or this changes to this, this number, you have to like recalculate it. What does that mean? So yes, one, I want them to do the math, but two, I want them to understand what changing certain things in that specific calculation actually means.
Perfect. Ed asked, what level of student would this be targeted towards?
I would say probably second year students. So they've had a little bit of introduction, maybe some basic business. So anytime in second or third year, you will be good to go for that. They should have enough sort of acumen behind them and understanding, and maybe even like the second semester of first year, but I would definitely say second year for sure, third year, yeah. Those are the age groups, I guess.
Another question we had is, how do you choose which relevant supply chain issues to bring up in class?
How did I like to put, or how would an instructor, or how would I, when I wrote the book?
I think they're just asking how you would choose as an instructor. What do you do? How do you decide which ones to bring up in class?
I try and get to know my students and see what they're interested in, right? Like if students are engaged, then they're going to be learning, right? So if there's something cool in the example, or something that's happened that's like really relevant, or perhaps even like impacting them, like picking a local event, something that's happened at the college or university or in that town, and pulling in that type of supply chain example. So I just try and make sure that it's like fairly relevant to them, as well as being, current and maybe mildly interesting as well.
Great. Good advice. How do you anticipate the career options changing in the next decade for supply chain?
Oh my gosh, a decade. Well, I know that the state, so this is an interesting and fun fact. The state of Minnesota currently has 66,000 supply chain jobs open. That's 66,000 supply chain jobs are not filled right now. And that's right now. So it's only going to get bigger, right? I think people are really realizing how they've been very dependent perhaps on offshore, or sort of separating this out, or it wasn't really a word that people knew much about until a few years ago. And now it's the buzzword. You cannot go anywhere. You can't open any news article. You can't go on Twitter. You can't go anywhere without seeing supply chain, supply chain, supply chain, supply chain, right? It's so much more than, and I had a lovely colleague tell me one time that she told someone she worked in supply chain. They're like, oh, like who needs a lot of chain? And she was like, oh, like, the level of knowledge I think around supply chain has been quite low. It's mostly been thought of as in manufacturing, and it's not. It's in banking, it's in restaurants, it's in just getting yourself up and getting out to work in the morning. So the jobscape is going to get huge, right? You're going to get people that primarily focus on making sure that you have good data, so that you have really good metrics. There's going to be a lot more people available in procurement and sourcing. We have additive manufacturing that has become a really big thing. So you're going to have all these people try and then source like specifically raw material to then make their own in-house, or all these things. So I anticipate that the job market is just going to continue to grow as more people understand what's going on and what's needed. It's like, oh, it would be useful if we had someone that did this. And it's like, well, this one person that was in supply chain can't do these 18 things. You're going to need to get more people. And I think you're going to see a lot more specializations. We already are seeing like supply chain sustainability jobs. That was not a thing 5 years ago. There was the jobs like that did not exist. They weren't like, people were like, oh yeah, sustainability is really important. But now you're seeing supply chain sustainability. You are seeing people that work specifically in supply chain transparency. They are looking to find exactly where that cobalt came from that is going into their piece of equipment, where the lithium came from. They are doing all these things, and now they have someone that is specifically looking after that, or helping to build up like underprivileged companies in countries that are not as well off as say Canada, the US, or largely most of Western Europe. So you just have this job market that's now, it's something you kicked open the door, and it's like anything is possible now in supply chain. There's going to be so many more cool things and stuff that just we haven't even thought of is going to occur. I think it's inevitable because you can do so much when you have a really well-oiled supply chain. So,
Great.
yeah.
Well, we've got one last question here that we'll ask before we reveal our winner and then finish for the day. Santiago asks, can this book be used for a course in international logistics?
I would say yes, because I definitely try and take an international focus. I talk about different companies or things such as like offshoring, onshoring, dealing with transport, ocean, air freight, that's all covered. So yeah, I would think it would be very beneficial for a course that's in international logistics. Logistics is part of supply chain. They're not like super like different. Supply chain is this overarching part and logistics is one really necessary piece of it, but it's useful if you're going to be dealing with international logistics to just understand some of the lingo and some of the things that can happen and ways to sort of improve the logistics experience, like how you can talk to your suppliers or how you can talk to your clients and just figure out what's going on with them to get the information that you need to make your service, better for them. You can pick things up on time, you have better relationships, all of that stuff. I think because you have that, information backing you. And I have an entire chapter on transportation, and I go through really big examples on when you use ocean freight versus air freight versus, rail, all these things to help deal with, all the issues you come across. I also talk about tariffs, duties, custom fees, free trade zones, all of that stuff. So I think that's very important for people to, know about as well. And then of course, on Friday, you go through the logistics, transportation and logistics textbook, but mine definitely has a large chapter on it. And I think that what you learn in it would be very beneficial for an international logistics program.
Great. Thank you, Danaka. And thank you everyone for your questions. We really appreciate you participating with us today. And I do once again want to invite you to join us on Friday for the launch of our logistics and transportation management courseware with Vicki Clark and Brad Gatlin. So now, before we end, I want to reveal the winner of our $100 Amazon gift card. And the winner is Christopher Wilbanks from Grantham University. So congratulations, Christopher. Go ahead and we will reach out to you and get you that information. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Danaka, for all of your hard work. We know that you've spent over a year working on this. This is a lot of work. And we know Stukent, there's a lot of people behind the scenes who have worked really hard to bring this courseware and this upcoming simulation about. So thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great day. And if you'd like to connect with Danaka, there's a link right here and you can click and you can connect with her on LinkedIn. Thank you so much everyone for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.